Welcome to Around the Girdle Earth, the podcast where Dartmouth stories come to life. I'm your host, Yovany Jerez, class of '03, and on each episode, we sit down with members of the Dartmouth alumni community to explore the moments, the mentors, and the memories that shaped them from the green to the great unknown. So, whether you graduated last year or decades ago, these conversations offer a window into the journeys we have taken and the common threads that connect us all together. So grab your favorite drink, step into the story, cue up the nostalgia, and let's wonder together. Today, my very special guest is Lincoln Vidal, class of 1995, who I just heard came straight out of the gym to join us. Lincoln, why don't you show us that towel that you were showing me earlier?
So yes, technically, if you said a couple hours ago, but yes, this is a Dartmouth towel it's a beach towel that I have at home. And given that, first of all, thank you for the invite, Giovanni. This is a real pleasure and a treat for me. I'm not much of a social media guy, but I'm so happy to be a part of this. So it's a towel that I happen to have at home, and I brought a couple of weeks ago. Since every time I go to the gym, I come into the office, I'm sweating profusely for a good half hour later. So it just so happens that this morning I looked at it, it was there, and I was like, I got to show it during the video. So here we are.
And I'm glad also your Dartmouth degree is hanging back there. So you're in gear, I'm in gear.
Yes,
we're
sir.
ready to do this thing. So why don't you get us started? Take us back before Dartmouth. Like what was that family life? Where you grew up? What was that, that house culture? Was education emphasized? Like help us get a little bit of context before we get going into the Dartmouth experience.
Great, some really good questions, and I'm going to do my best to keep it short and sweet. So I came from Cuba just before I was 9 years old in 1980. So I was a little bit more than eight years old at the time that I came. I came with my immediate family of five: my father, my mom, my brother, my younger brother, my older sister. So Juan Isoda, which is my mom's name. My dad, Juan, passed away when I was younger, but he got us here. My sister Rita, my younger brother Luis, and we came in 1980 on one of the last freedom flights to the United States. We set up shop, lived with families that were from our town in Cuba. We shared probably 13 or so people, lived in a 2-bedroom house in Little Havana that we shared when we first got here. Then we graduated to what we call efficiencies. So that's basically a very small apartment that I shared with my siblings. So, those were the early stories. We graduated from there to a small rental property living in Little Havana. I went to high school at Miami Senior High School, which is the oldest high school in Miami. In terms of education, neither of my parents had, went beyond the grade school level. I think in the case of my mom, probably the 5th grade, and I think in the case of my dad, no later than the 6th grade. So while they themselves had not gone to school at the university in Cuba because of their circumstances, it was something that was always emphasized. And so from a young age, I kept hearing, you got to go to school. And so a lot of what I saw them go through is a lot of, challenges that they faced as immigrants, as folks who didn't speak the language, but the example they set for me was amazing. So they had two, I remember vividly early on, my parents had 2 jobs. They had their regular job in the mornings, and then in the evenings, they would clean office buildings in downtown Miami. And I remember that, from as far back as I can go. But the example they set for me, I saw the struggles, I saw what it took, and getting us here was huge. So, it was an example, and I said to myself from an early age, I'm not going to stop. Their experiences have been difficult, and they've gotten me here, and now it's up to me to make the most of the opportunity and take it to the next level. So I went to high school at Miami Senior High School, which is, again, the oldest high school in Miami. Graduated, I think, top 5 of the class of probably 700 to 800, 900, 1,000 people class, and landed in Hanover. My first visit to Hanover,
was
during Perspectives weekend. I think
But
they
before we
oh,
get
sorry.
into that,
Okay.
how does even Dartmouth came into your radar
Great
in
question.
Miami?
I can't believe I forgot that part, but thank you for highlighting that. So, as a senior at Miami High, I had the good fortune of speaking to our guidance advisor, CAP counselors, and so there were two of them, and Barbara Inskeep is a lady who, and then there was also a lady who was tremendous. Her name was Ruth Krudlik. So Barbara Inskeep shared with me again, this is pre-internet, everybody. So a long time ago, she shared with me basically a booklet of the best schools in the country. And Dartmouth was one of those schools. And she said, "Hey, have you heard of this movie called Animal House?" And I said, "As a matter of fact, I have." And that's how I learned about Dartmouth, fall of what would be my senior year, 1990. And I said, you know what? I read up on it, elite school, tremendous environment, never been north of Florida, outside of Florida, hadn't flown on a plane since we first got here from Cuba. So that was also a big deal. And then, yeah, so that she's the one that turned me in, to Dartmouth. And then I applied, and eventually, I was fortunate enough to get in. And then I visited, as I said earlier, during Perspectives Week, and I think that's called something else now.
No, it's the same. It's the same time.
I thought it was called Dimensions. I thought somebody had said it was called Dimensions.
I think you're right, actually. I think you're right.
But anyway, I digress.
But they bring you to campus when it's nice, beautiful, and not cold.
So Giovanni, let me just stop you there, my friend. So what I would say is that I remember it vividly, and it was my senior spring break, and at the time, so I'm talking April, well into the end of April, so in between breaks for the winter and spring semester. It was probably, we were going to the beach here because that's what you do when you're in Miami and you're a senior in high school, and getting probably getting sun that's now in retrospect maybe not so good for you, but we were doing that. And I remember visiting. It was a Thursday, and I get to Hanover, and it was snowing. It was high 30s. Yes, it was. You look at maybe things have changed since then, but I remember it was snowing.
Wow.
And I saw what was an idyllic place, but was remote, cold, and for the first time in my life, I saw snow. And I remember thinking, "Oh my God, this is different. This is a lot different than I had envisaged." And but this is the kind of place that I want to go to school at. And I think for me, I guess some people might say after having that experience that I'm a glutton for punishment. But I saw this as a tremendous opportunity, a beautiful campus to get an elite education and to really challenge me to get out of my comfort zone. And I think that's what drove me.
Now, why do I have the sneaky suspicion that your parents were a little worried about you stepping away so far from home in the middle of nowhere?
So you're right about that. And so as I mentioned earlier, my dad had passed away a few years prior before I was a senior. So he passed away when I was a sophomore in high school. And so it's the kind of thing that used to make me tear up, because for a long time I wouldn't share that story about my dad, but it's not going to make me tear up here. But yes, you're right. My mom, I think she'd never heard of New Hampshire, if I'm being frank with you. She certainly never visited any state outside of Florida, and but she knew that academically, it was a great school and a great opportunity. So she never wavered, and I will tell you that she was fully supportive. But I will also tell you, had she not been fully supportive, I would have still made that decision. But I'm fortunate that my mom, whenever I've consulted with her on these kinds of life decisions, when I have, she has been supportive. So yeah, there was trepidation, and I remember, probably being a little bit emotional, leaving, on my way to, I guess, orientation, because I know that they had the, I forgot what that was called, but it was the pre-orientation There was.
Did you do an OC?
Yeah, I didn't. I didn't.
Outing club.
I didn't. And that's, that's one of the things I probably regret. But I think in my mind, I said to myself, I'm going to delay as long as I can, and then get on campus, do my orientation, and get started. But I remember being a bit emotional. My mom, who is a strong-willed woman who has experienced a lot in life and has gone through a lot of challenging circumstances, losing her husband, not ever seeing her family again after we left Cuba, and many other things. She was strong and she was resolute, and I think that that's something that I'll never forget. But it wasn't easy.
When did she first visit Dartmouth?
Another great question. And so you did. This is not part of the initial.
We're just flowing. We're just flowing.
Yeah, I like it. I like it. So she, because of our situation financially, she was unable. She didn't visit me until I graduated. And that's another one of the challenges. It's one of the things that I'm extremely proud of. Having gone to Dartmouth and that experience, and I'm very involved with the alumni interviewing. I've been very involved over the last 4 to 5 years, and at different times in other places like New York when I lived there, and before in the early 2000s when I got back to Miami. But I think it was just it was tough, man. It was tough, and because of our circumstances financially, I would just come down. And so I remember my first semester being on campus, and everybody goes away goes home to for Thanksgiving break. And I remember I was one of the few students. There were a few of us, right? So I remember there was like the kids that are from, say, California. I had a classmate of mine that was from California. He stayed back. I stayed back. And then there were some kids, the international students who are, I tell people all the time, those kids are built different. A lot of times, a lot of those kids, have been away from their families for such a long period of time. So that was tough, though. That was the realization that if I wanted to do, if I'm here to finish, what I came here to do and have that experience and graduate, which I think was the most important part of this, it was going to mean that I was going to have to do this. So it wasn't until my senior, when I graduated, that my mom visited, and she loved the campus, and I'll never forget, because for her first time being there, and it was in early June, and maybe this doesn't happen anymore, but I can tell you, I swear to you, that it was in the 40s. The week before my graduation, it was in the 40s. It was quite cool for somebody from Miami, for my mom. And then we had, at the time, President Clinton was our commencement speaker. So that was kind of a neat experience. And we had the ceremony at the at War Memorial, which is I don't know if it's still the name of where the football stadium is at. And I remember vividly seeing like snipers on top of the stadium. But that was a pretty cool experience. And so I have a picture with then President Clinton that I've always kept with me. So that was the first time. So I got there, and it wasn't until 4 years later that I had a family member visit me. And it wasn't for a lack of want. It was more because of our, financial circumstances.
Yeah, I really, so it certainly seems like you were homesick and you experienced some of that. And I don't think that experience, it's very common among, like you said, immigrants and people who never been away from home for too long. How did you manage to make Hanover, New Hampshire home? What did you do in those 4 years so that you were not overwhelmed and overcome emotionally with the homesickness?
I have to tell you, you keep asking some really good questions. That was a challenge. And I will say that my first 2 years, I would say my first year in particular, I think this is true of somebody who's an immigrant, as you are, and given the circumstances that I was coming from, I was very driven. I was driven is an understatement, but I was very intense about and intentional about and strong-willed about finishing the job. Again, first in the family to, go to college, graduate from college, and then go on to other things. But I was determined not to be an example that unfortunately is too common of, kids that go away to college and then come back because, for whatever reason, because life is difficult and life is challenging. And when you're the first that's breaking ground, that's difficult. So I was determined not to do that. So my first year, I like to say I was kind of a machine. And then it hit me at the end of my first year where I was like, wait, this is not going to be like, I can't just do this for the next 4 years or 3 years. Right. And then it's kind of like, okay, reconciling, the environment and the challenges there with being away from home. And I think that I built, relationships with people, locally, students, in some cases, professors. And I found people to be, and I swear to you, this is my experience, but I found people to be open, and this is irrespective of background, race, nationality, gender. Like I found people open to want to help and see that, okay, this has got to be challenging for you. So, there were professors, there were other students that I met along the way. I remember vividly my financial aid advisor, and for the life of me, I'm struggling. She's a face that I'm quite familiar, and if I saw her right now, I'd be able to point her out. And she was somebody who actually, whenever I would go in to meet with her, she was super supportive, and and it was somebody who actually served kind of as a counselor, if you will, although that was not her role. And so that's how I did it, through a lot of grit, determination, and then establishing, a community of people that I felt that I can turn to, because I think, given my life experiences prior to that date, I was not one to trust people. So that was the hardest thing for me. And that was really hard for me to trust people. And along the way, like I said, I met some students. One of the students I tell them this, that served as a role model to me, is Eddie Fernandez. And Eddie Fernandez is somebody who I am told you interviewed, and is somebody who I hold in high regard. So when Eddie talked, who was a couple of years older than me, and I think when I was a sophomore, we had a class together. That's how I met Eddie. He was a senior. So he was this guy, from Cuban American guy, very proud of his roots, from New Jersey. Obviously, I'm a recent arrival, less than 10 years removed from Cuba, from Little Havana, and I bonded with him. And mostly what I did is I listened, because at the time I probably didn't talk much. And people now say, I can't imagine that version of Lincoln, but this is true. This is true. And so, and it's meeting people along the way like that. Professors that I met, I remember Jorge Hernandez, who's a Pedro Pan, came here from Cuba, by himself. And he was a guy who was not only I took classes with him, but he, after I took classes with him for years later, he served as a guy who was a mentor to me and a friend. And so people like that were instrumental.
What was your major?
Great question again. So I was a double major and a minor. I had a government. My focus was, kind of American government I really liked, and then I did international government. So I took a lot of classes with David Becker, who I'm sure is no longer there, but was one of the leading authorities on international government, specifically Latin America. So that was one of my majors. My other major was Spanish literature, and then I also did a minor. At one point, I was thinking of doing a triple major, which is something that I tell the kids all the time when I interview I interview college applicants in Dartmouth. I mean, Dartmouth gives you that level of flexibility. So I wound up doing Latin American Caribbean Studies, which was then a new major. And then you can also do it as a minor. And I think I took as a minor, either 5 or 6 classes. And it was like a cross section of government, sociology, and I don't know. So it's government sociology, and I'm forgetting something, but there was like an economics component to it too. And that was really interesting. And I enjoyed those classes tremendously as well.
Yeah. I always remind people I double major as well, sociology and Spanish literature.
Okay.
I did the Spanish literature because I was like, okay, I'm doing everything in English, but I want to keep up with my Spanish. And I want to, make sure I don't forget it and raise it to a professional level.
Agreed.
But it was to my surprise that the double major means you get 2 degrees. And I
Right.
was like, so
I guess
so
I never really thought about it that way, but you're right. You're right about that. You're right.
yeah, if you look at your diploma back there, it
Yeah.
says AB first major and AB the
So,
second major.
so I'm going to do that right now because I think that, you're a slightly more recent graduate than I am. Um, I have, it's in Latin. So my Latin, I need to brush up on my Latin. I just
But
want to
it's
say,
two for the price of one.
okay,
That's
no,
great.
so fair enough. And I think I got some, I know, I think so. Yes, I have to confirm that, but it may not, my degree may not say that the two majors or the minor, but yes. And the great thing about a liberal arts education is that you can do that and then still,
Yeah.
go on to be whatever, an economist or a lawyer or a doctor.
So
So
you graduated 95, and
Mhm.
then how long was it before you started? Well, you were like, I want to become an attorney, and I want to go to University of Pennsylvania, UPenn.
Yeah, so good question. I think, it's interesting for a very long time, especially in high school, and I think in my middle school years and going back to my elementary school or formative school years, grammar school years. I guess that's the cool term is to say it, but okay. So I used to, I had a natural, I think I had an affinity for the sciences and particularly math. But then I realized along the way that I kind of grew out of that. And something that I said, okay, well, I have I can probably read and write at a certain level. So I think, it was the realization that that's something that, I may be potentially strong in, that I could also do as a career. So for me, it was not until after I graduated Dartmouth. So it's something that crossed my mind. And what I did is I said to myself, okay, I did a couple of interviews. So I think a lot of kids do investment banking. And I probably did that because, a lot of other people were doing it. So I did that. I did some other things. There was an interesting experience that I had that never mushroomed with a certain federal agency that goes by three letters that is something that I kind of looked at briefly and never pursued for other reasons. But I ultimately said, okay, I think law school is something that I want to do, but I don't want to just do it because everybody else or maybe some of my friends are doing it. I want to see what it's like to work at a law firm. And so that led me, we talk about the Dartmouth Alumni Network, and I remember going to the Career Advanced Placement Office. I'm probably confusing it with the acronym that they use in law school, but basically the Career Guidance Office at Dartmouth. And at the time, again, this is pre-social media. At the time, everything was in these folders, and you would pull out these cabinets. And so I found, I looked up different opportunities, and I came across a few that were in New York. And one of them was working as a paralegal, which didn't require any formal education other than having a college degree. And the partner there was Jose Fernandez, who was a guy who I also highly respect and was a mentor to me. Met him then, got an offer there, and I think I got a couple offers because, they're paying next to nothing. I'll be frank with you. Yes, Jose, I was underpaid.
Yeah,
That's
class
okay.
class of 77, and he was elected as the first Dartmouth trustee.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. So you did you interned for him, and
I
that
so
kind of
yeah,
like opened the world of legal.
yes, I did. I worked at then Baker McKenzie, where he was at in New York. It's so at 805 Third Avenue. I worked under or with Jose and attorneys that reported into him as one of the paralegals, and that was a really cool experience. And I remember he left to another firm. I finished out my 2 years at Baker McKenzie, and then I applied my second year in New York. So this would have been now 96. In the fall of 96, I applied for admission to law school. And, I did a wish list of schools, and Penn was at the top of that list, with another school that waitlisted me that will go nameless. And I went to Penn, and it was a tremendous experience. But it was that interaction, that experience, and working with Jose and a couple of other people that worked on his team. And, this was a very diverse group of attorneys with a Latin America emerging markets emphasis. So that's how I got that ball rolling.
Now, when I look at your LinkedIn profile, it just looks like you went straight to work with the Norwegian Cruise Line.
Yeah.
You've been there for almost 21 years.
That is right. So it's funny. Again, I think I said at some point that I'm not the biggest social media guy. So I have an incomplete LinkedIn profile. I probably took it down a few years ago because there was some sort of hacking incident, and I probably had more than my fair share of fraud committed on my person. But yeah, so I have an incomplete profile. But I worked at a couple of big law firms, so I have that New York experience from having worked as a paralegal. Then I came down here, worked at a couple of different firms. One of them is Greenberg Traurig, which is a Miami-based international firm. But really, it's really crazy. So I worked at a couple of big firms before I came to Norwegian, but I've been here since 2004. So going February of 17 of 2026, I will be here. I'll be celebrating my 22nd year, and I love the company. I've grown up through the ranks. Came here as a very junior associate. Worked with a great team of attorneys. And in the last, I have different areas of responsibility. So I oversee our commercial contracts, work with an excellent team of attorneys. They're very hardworking, very smart. They keep me on my toes. There's a high standard that we all have for each other. We don't have to say it, but we see it. Also oversee our intellectual property portfolio. Work closely with an attorney there that is in our Bermuda office. He does a terrific job there, and on some other things that are important to the company.
So what's Norwegian about the Norwegian Cruise Line? Because you guys are headquarters in Miami, right?
That is a great question. So, but here's what I would say. Like, one of my other areas that I took on in the last year, actually the beginning of 2024, is international. So Norwegian is very much, it's the oldest of the cruise lines. Got started in 1966, so before Royal, before Carnival were a thing, and has been the innovator in the cruise industry for a long time. And so I go back to things like when we went public, when the company went public, I was involved in those efforts. I was involved in other efforts that are tied to my current role, which is international. So when we were sailing to Cuba, for example, I was involved with the contracting for that and other areas of the business. And so it's been a tremendous experience. I love the company. I got to give a shout out to our fearless leader, Dan Farkas, who's a good friend, an excellent role model, and has a work ethic second to none. And so, here I am. But it's funny how it's kind of, I came here from another country, and now I'm very involved I oversee on the legal side, working with other parts of the legal department here, all of our international operations that are, my role is, I guess my title is International Legal Operations, which is kind of a legal quasi role. So I travel a fair amount these days. So it's kind of
with 32 ships and 700 worldwide destinations.
That's right.
I would imagine that's a lot of different contracts.
That's right.
Cultures and identities.
Right.
And I would imagine that your Dartmouth education uniquely sets you up because our Dartmouth education is being in an environment with people from so many parts of the world, right?
Giovany,
and
you're hitting it on the head. I again, because I do think that Dartmouth in that way is very unique. And one of the things that people always ask me is like, what sets Dartmouth apart? And I think there's a lot of great schools, right? So to me, Dartmouth is an elite academic institution, but it's also a place where people are very socially involved and are involved in athletics. So not that I am, I'm probably biased when I'm going to say this, but I think, a typical Dartmouth graduate tends to be, to me, a more well-balanced, Ivy Leaguer, if that's the right word. And I think part of that is because you get exposure. And so I did get exposure to people from all over the world and all over the States. And that was eye-opening. And when you're a kid who's, literally just gotten here from another country, learned how to read and write in English, and his exposure is, Miami, seeing this and meeting people from other, Hispanics, people from all over the country that are Hispanic or otherwise, right? And then internationally. And so I think it set me up, and I really love, the relationships that I've built. We have offices all over Europe, parts of Asia, Latin America to some degree, Bermuda, and others that we're working on. And I love interactions. Just this morning, I was on a call. I'm not going to name names, but I was on a call with folks from the UK, Italy, and then obviously I'm here, and later on I'll be on a call with our friends in Australia. And I really enjoy getting to know those people on a personal level and engaging with them. And obviously, most importantly, making sure that if they have a legal issue that, we help them solve it, and do it in a way that is fast, proactive, and obviously it's a customer service thing. So you want to make sure that they like working with you. That's important.
For sure. So I'd be curious to sort of get your perspective on, if there was a high school student watching this podcast, right?
Sure.
I think they're going to get a lot from your how honest and transparent you've been about the struggles of going to Dartmouth, but then still finding a way to make it home. And I'm curious, because you obviously are a double Ivy. You went to Dartmouth and UPenn. Do you see any points of diversion between the alumni network of those two institutions?
Oh, are you talking about from between Dartmouth and, say, Penn?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I'm again, they say the golden rule is that you can only claim where you went to undergrad, right? So, I'm probably, a little biased. So I'm very, or I shouldn't say very, I try to be as much as I can be involved with Dartmouth. And I think the biggest thing for me is being involved in the alumni interview process. And I specifically, when I'm involved with that, I specifically want to interview kids that are kind of from a similar trajectory. So kids that are from like the inner city high schools in Miami, which is the high school the kind of high school that I went to. And it's those kids that I am, most interested in interviewing. But I've interviewed private school kids, and there's no, bias there. But, those are the kids that I relate to the most. But I will say that Dartmouth to me is like the original 13 colonies, small but mighty. And I sing its praises because it's important to acknowledge your experience in an authentic way and in a real way. And I will say for me that it was not easy. But I'm so happy that I persevered and I stuck with it, because now once you come out on the other side, you can fully realize the neat experience that Dartmouth was. I often find myself, this is kind of crazy because I'm not the most melancholic person, but as you get older, you start looking back a little bit. It's okay, although I'm always kind of looking ahead. And I would say that I often think about how like the neat experiences that I had there. And I guess, if I had to do it all over again, there's some things that I would do differently, but I think financially and, losing a parent fresh off that, and those kind of struggles that I had, sometimes prevented me, and sometimes I prevented myself from fully realizing I think I like to think that I did to the best of my ability, but I always think there's more that I could have gotten out of it. But it was
but you're not the only one with that sentiment. I like to
Yeah.
think that I optimized my Dartmouth experience, but when
Yeah.
looking at the past 2020, I keep thinking like, well, I could have also done this and I could have done that, So
Yeah.
one of the things I wish I could have done was semester at sea.
So
I don't know if that was that part of your experience,
so
or
semester at sea. Tell me what that's about, because I have another one, but you finish, please.
no, it was basically, you're on a cruise with a bunch of college kids from all over the world, and you're doing a semester at sea, going to port to port. You're taking academic classes, and and also
So wait.
visiting.
so that is a really neat experience. And I'm going to be frank with you, Giovanni. I've been in the cruise industry for, it'll be 22 years now in February. I had not heard of this opportunity. It was not there when I was at Dartmouth, but I hope. So I've not. What is the brand? What's the cruise line?
I don't. I really don't know.
It's not us. But what I will tell you is that sounds really neat. But along the same wavelength, I had, if I had one of the prep questions that you by the way, you've gone off the beaten path a little bit, which I like. You've kept this, you've kept it lively. But one of the questions that I think you asked was, what are, do you have any regrets? And I like to think I don't have a lot of regrets, but I would say my biggest regret is not having done a foreign semester abroad. Okay. And I started the process, and I wanted to go, and I wanted to go to Sevilla as a Spanish major. I thought, and now if I was there as an undergrad, I would go to Sevilla, I would go to London and Italy, and I probably wouldn't graduate on time because.
Well, to be honest, I almost skipped my semester abroad. I went to Copenhagen, Denmark, to study sociology, but honestly,
I have to pick your brain on Copenhagen, because one of the places that we want to visit, and
beautiful Copenhagen. That's the slogan over there. Beautiful. But I almost skipped it because of ignorance. I didn't know that. So obviously, a lot of my tuition was already being covered by Dartmouth, but I didn't know that it could be transferred abroad. So in my mind, I thought that it was something that I had to pay and finance by myself, and I didn't want to be a burden to my family for that. So that's why I never really explored the abroad programs. But then in conversation with one of my professors, he was like, "What are you talking about? That's covered under your tuition. Apply, go." And I was like, "Let's do it." And that's absolutely right.
And that's how you did it, right?
That's how I was able to do it. So then what I ended up doing was I ended up doing a work study, and I saved $5,000. So when I was there, I was able to visit all the cities, because everything in Europe is interconnected. So
that's awesome. I have to say, you're making me really jealous right now, even though I probably travel a fair amount now, more than I ever thought I would. Personal, but really because of my function at the company. But I have to say that I think, if we're being completely candid, and I think if we're speaking to an immigrant, Hispanic man or woman, person, these are the things that go through your head, right? And so I also want to acknowledge that fear is part of it.
Yeah.
Fear, if you've not traveled, if you've never been outside of the country, you don't know what else is out there, and you come from a family that hasn't had that exposure. So there's a fear to it. Like, how am I going to adapt being in a semester in, I don't know, Copenhagen, which sounds like it's beautiful. And I've heard it's beautiful, and when it's on my bucket list. And I think that's really a part of it. And so much of it is overcoming those fears. And I think it sounds like, and relatively speaking, we've been able to do that. I will say that having people that come along the way that come into your life, and you don't know the reason, that also opens up, windows and thoughts and
so much of the journey is awareness, right?
Yes.
Like even becoming aware, the opportunity exists, right? Like, oh, Dartmouth exists. Let me dig upon that, right? So that's almost like the first step, awareness. And then the second step is to have champions in your life. And that's why I think it's so cool that you've invested so much in mentoring inner city kids to be aware, but also apply and to go through the process and to take it to the next step. I really like your comment on fear and the reservations that we might have, right? Because of the unknown. And I actually think that's a really good point to end this wonderful conversation. I don't know if you have any final thoughts, any golden nuggets of wisdom that you might want to, finalize with.
I think, first of all, it's been a tremendous experience. I really enjoyed this, Giovanni. You're good in your role, I have to say. You've kept me on my toes, but thank you for the opportunity. I think for me, the biggest thing is, there's all sorts of things that I tie to Dartmouth. And I would say one of the most important things that I learned from Dartmouth And it's almost like it's a competition, right? But it's a good competition, is giving back. And that really drives, I think there's really important things that are parts of my life, my family, my wife, my daughter, Christina, Isabella, my extended family, brother or sister, my mom who's still alive, and then the rest of my family is Cuba, or now deceased, but obviously work. And then the I would say a really important part of that for me is giving back. And I will say that it's something that Dartmouth brought out in me. And it's a promise that I made to myself. I'll never forget senior year. I was at Dartmouth. And without saying this the wrong way, I just remember saying, I want to give back. I want to give people, I want to introduce people to, to these opportunities and to create awareness around this. And hopefully these kids won't come back and be spoiled.
No, I think that's a fantastic ending to this podcast. You basically, you strike me as, an individual that lifts others as you climb. And I think that essence is embodied by so many Dartmouth alumni. So, Lincoln, thank you so much for joining us in this podcast. Anybody else who's online, thank you for joining us on Around the Girdled Earth. If today's conversation sparked a memory or gave you something to think about, leave us a thoughtful reflection or introspection in the comment section. And more importantly, share the episode with a classmate or fellow alum. It's an easy way to keep the Dartmouth spirit alive in this chaotic digital age. So until next time, stay curious, stay green, and keep roaming this beautiful girdle earth we call home. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.